I should have known something was wrong when Cameron insisted I wear the burgundy dress. Not the emerald one I'd chosen that complimented my eyes, but the one he'd picked out 3 weeks ago and left hanging in my closet with a note that said, "Wear this tomorrow night." At 28, I'd learned to pick my battles. A dress wasn't worth the argument, especially not tonight. Our engagement anniversary deserved celebration, not conflict. The Bellecour restaurant occupied the top floor of the Paramount building, all crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. I'd been here once before, for my promotion celebration at the architecture firm. Cameron had complained about the prices the entire evening. Tonight, he'd made the reservation himself. My heels clicked across the marble entryway as the Maître greeted me with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Price, your party is already seated. Your party, not your fiancé." The phrasing should have been my second warning. I followed him through the dining room, acutely aware of the eyes that tracked my movement. The Bellecour attracted Manhattan's elite. Old money, new money, and everything in between congregated here to see and be seen. I recognized faces from charity galas and business magazines. 200 people, easily, all dressed in designer labels and dripping with jewelry that cost more than my annual salary. Cameron sat at a table near the center of the room, prime real estate for visibility. But he wasn't alone. Sophia Hartwell occupied the chair that should have been mine. Blonde hair styled in perfect waves, a dress that probably cost 5 figures, and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. I knew her by reputation. Hartwell Hotels had been a Manhattan institution for 4 generations. She'd been on the cover of Forbes last month. I stopped 3 feet from the table. My portfolio, containing the blueprints I'd spent the last month perfecting, suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Cameron stood, his expression carefully neutral. "Alyssa, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming." Like I was a business associate, not the woman he'd proposed to a year ago. "Cameron, what is this?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He gestured to an empty chair across from them. "Please sit. We need to talk." I didn't sit. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to leave, to walk out before whatever was coming could hit me. But pride locked my knees in place. I wouldn't run. Not in front of 200 witnesses. Cameron glanced at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about our future, about what I need in a partner as I move forward with my career." My fingers tightened on the portfolio. "Your career. I'm planning to run for state senate next year. It's an opportunity I can't pass up. But it requires certain considerations." He gestured to Sophia. Sophia understands the political landscape, her family's connections, her experience with public life. She's the kind of partner who can help me succeed. The words landed like physical blows. Around us, conversations had begun to quiet. People were listening. "You asked me here to break up with me?" The question came out flat. "I'm ending our engagement, yes." Cameron reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. My engagement ring. The one I'd left on his bathroom counter last week when the band had started irritating my finger. He'd promised to take it to the jeweler for resizing. He opened the box, removed the ring, and set it on the table between us. "I think it's best if we make a clean break. You're ambitious, Alyssa. You've always been focused on your career, on making a name for yourself. People might say you were with me for the connections, for what I could do for your architectural firm." Heat flooded my face. "You think I'm with you for your connections? I'm simply stating how it might appear. You went from a junior architect to project lead within 6 months of our engagement. People talk." Sophia leaned forward, her expression dripping with false sympathy. "It's nothing personal, sweetie. Cameron just needs someone who understands his world. Someone who was born into it, rather than trying to climb into it." The portfolio slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Blueprints scattered across the marble. The project I'd killed myself to complete. The design that had earned me my promotion through genuine talent and 80-hour work weeks lay at their feet like garbage. Cameron didn't even glance at it. "I hope you understand this is what's best for both of us. You'll find someone more suited to your background eventually." Around us, phones had emerged from pockets and purses. Camera flashes sparked in my peripheral vision. Someone was recording this. Multiple someones. I should have said something cutting. Should have maintained my dignity with a perfect exit line that would haunt him forever. Instead, I bent down, gathered my scattered blueprints with shaking hands, and straightened. "Keep the ring," I managed. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Consider it payment for the year I wasted. I turned and walked toward the exit. Every step felt like moving through concrete. The conversations around me had become a dull roar. Sympathetic looks and barely concealed smirks followed my path to the door. The mayor tradee avoided my eyes as I passed. Even he'd known. They'd all known what tonight was really about. The evening air hit me like a slap when I pushed through the doors. October in Manhattan carried a bite that cut through the burgundy dress Cameron had chosen. The dress he'd wanted me to wear for my humiliation. I made it half a block before my legs gave out. A side street, away from the Bellecourt's main entrance, offered shadows and blessed solitude. I sank onto the curb, my dress pooling around me, blueprints clutched to my chest. The tears came then, hot and humiliating and absolutely inevitable. A year of my life, a year of believing someone loved me, of planning a future that had just been incinerated in front of 200 witnesses who were probably already posting about it on social media. Footsteps approached, but I couldn't find the energy to care. Let them see. Let them take their pictures. Nothing could make this worse. "Miss Price?" The voice was deep, controlled, and completely unfamiliar. I looked up through blurred vision. A man stood 3 feet away, backlit by street lamps. Tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair and a face composed of sharp angles and shadows. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders and a frame that suggested serious time in a gym. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and fixed on me with an intensity that felt almost physical. "I don't need help," I said, swiping at my face. "I disagree." He took a step closer. "There are photographers coming. In approximately 30 seconds, they'll round that corner and capture you sitting on a curb in tears. Tomorrow morning, those photos will be everywhere." As if summoned by his words, voices echoed from the direction of the Bellecourt's entrance. Male voices, excited and opportunistic. The stranger extended his hand. "My car is here, unless you'd prefer to give them the show they're hoping for." I stared at his hand. Strong fingers, a platinum watch that glinted in the streetlight, and absolutely no reason to trust him. But the voices were getting closer. I grabbed his hand and let him pull me to my feet. A black car idled at the curb, sleek and expensive. He opened the rear door and I slid inside, blueprints and all. He followed, settling beside me with economical grace. The door closed, sealing us in leather-scented darkness. "Drive," he said to the man behind the wheel. The car pulled away from the curb just as 3 men with cameras burst around the corner. I pressed against the far door, heart hammering. "Who are you?" He turned those dark eyes on me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Not threat, exactly, but not safety either. "Someone who just witnessed your very public humiliation," he said quietly. "And someone who might have a solution to your problem." The car's interior smelled like leather and something darker, something that suggested violence kept carefully at bay. I clutched my blueprints tighter, suddenly aware of how completely I'd abandoned common sense. Getting into a stranger's car because photographers were coming. Brilliant survival instinct, Alyssa. "You can drop me at the nearest subway station," I said, trying to sound like women who regularly fled public humiliations in luxury vehicles with mysterious men. I could. He angled himself to face me properly, and the passing streetlights illuminated his features in fragments. Sharp jawline, a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow, eyes that assessed me like I was a blueprint he was analyzing for structural weaknesses. Or you could listen to my proposal first. I don't need rescuing by a stranger with a hero complex. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. I don't have a hero complex. I have a business opportunity that requires someone in precisely your position. My position. I laughed, and it came out brittle. "You mean publicly humiliated and unemployed by morning?" "Not unemployed yet, But yes, that video is already viral. Check your phone if you don't believe me. I didn't want to. But my hand moved to my purse anyway, pulling out my phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Text messages from colleagues. Missed calls from my sister. And there, trending on 3 different platforms, Cameron Price announces engagement to Sophia Hartwell. The accompanying video showed me standing frozen at that table, blueprints falling from my hands. The comments were worse than the video itself. "They'll fire me." The words came out flat. My promotion was contingent on maintaining the firm's reputation. A social media scandal doesn't exactly scream professional stability. Probably. He didn't soften it with false reassurance. Which brings me to my offer. I need a wife. I turned to stare at him. Excuse me? 6 months. A contractual marriage for business purposes. In exchange, I'll ensure Cameron Price's career ends before it begins, and I'll pay you $500,000. The number hung in the air between us like something physical. $500,000. Enough to start my own firm. Enough to never depend on anyone's reputation but my own. This is insane, I said. I don't even know your name. Thomas D'Angelo. He said it like it should mean something. It did. Even I, who avoided anything connected to organized crime, had heard the name. The D'Angelo family controlled significant territory on the East Coast. Shipping, construction, and probably a dozen things that would make my law-abiding soul recoil. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman who operates in gray areas. His tone remained perfectly neutral. I need to finalize an agreement with several traditional Italian families who value stability and family structure. A wife provides legitimacy. Why not find someone who actually wants to marry you? Because this is business, not romance. Romance complicates things. You need financial security and revenge against the man who humiliated you. I need a spouse for 6 months to close a deal worth substantially more than the $500,000 I'm offering you. It's a transaction. The car glided through Manhattan's nighttime traffic, and I realized I had no idea where we were going. Stop the car. We're 3 blocks from your apartment. I'll drop you there. You'll consider my offer, and if you're interested, you'll call the number on this card. He produced a business card from his jacket. Simple, expensive cardstock with a phone number. Nothing else. And if I'm not interested, then you'll deal with tomorrow's fallout on your own. Fair warning, it will be brutal. The car stopped in front of my building, a modest walk-up in a neighborhood that was gentrifying slowly enough that I could still afford rent. The driver, whom I'd barely registered, stepped out and opened my door. Thomas D'Angelo remained in the shadows of the back seat. Think about it, Miss Price. 6 months of your life in exchange for the means to build the future you deserve. And the satisfaction of watching Cameron lose everything he thinks makes him important. I climbed out, legs shaky, blueprints crumpled against my chest. This is crazy. Most worthwhile decisions are. The door closed, and the car pulled away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with a business card in my hand, and absolutely no idea what to do with it. My apartment felt too small and too empty when I finally climbed the 4 flights to my door. I dropped the blueprints on my kitchen table and pulled up social media again, even though I knew better. The video had been shared 40,000 times. The comments had multiplied. Half of them called me a gold digger who'd gotten what I deserved. The other half pitied me in ways that somehow felt worse. I lasted 2 days. 2 days of sympathetic looks from colleagues and carefully worded suggestions from my boss that perhaps I should take a personal leave to let things settle down. 2 days of watching potential clients withdraw from projects because they didn't want the negative publicity. On the morning of the 3rd day, I stared at Thomas D'Angelo's business card and made a decision that would either save my life or destroy what remained of it. The phone rang once before a male voice answered. Address? Not hello. Not how can I help you. Just the immediate question of someone who expected my call. I gave him my office address, and he hung up without confirming anything. 20 minutes later, a text arrived. Red sedan outside in 5 minutes. Get in. The sedan was precisely where promised, and the driver offered no conversation as we navigated through midday traffic to the waterfront. Not the glossy, tourist-friendly waterfront. The working docks where cargo ships unloaded and warehouses squatted like concrete fortresses. We stopped in front of a building that looked abandoned from the outside. The driver gestured toward a side door, and I realized I was expected to enter alone. The interior contradicted the exterior completely. Modern office space occupied the ground floor, all sleek furniture and state-of-the-art technology. But it was the men I noticed most. 3 of them, positioned strategically around the room, all watching me with the kind of alertness that suggested military training and concealed weapons. "Miss Price?" Thomas emerged from an office in the back, and daylight did nothing to soften his appearance. If anything, it made him more intimidating. Tall, powerfully built, wearing another suit that probably cost more than my car. "Thank you for coming. I haven't agreed to anything, but you're here. Which means you're considering it." He gestured toward his office. "Please." The office held a desk, 2 chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the docks. He closed the door, cutting off the view of his armed guards. "I need to understand what I'd actually be agreeing to," I said, remaining standing. "Marriage means what exactly? Living together? Public appearances?" "Yes to both. You'd move into my apartment. We'd attend social functions together, present the image of a stable, committed relationship, but separate bedrooms, no physical intimacy unless mutually agreed upon for appearances, and you maintain complete professional freedom. Except I can't tell anyone the truth." "Correct. As far as the world is concerned, we're genuinely married. The contract itself remains confidential." I crossed my arms. "And what about your actual business? The illegal parts? You don't question my operational decisions, but you're free to voice concerns about anything related to legitimate construction projects. I own several development companies that operate entirely within legal boundaries. For 6 months. 6 months. Then we divorce quietly. You receive your payment, and we both move forward." I looked out at the docks, at the ships being loaded with cargo I probably didn't want to know about. "And Cameron? You said you'd destroy his career." "I have numerous connections in political and legal circles. By the time I'm finished, Cameron Price will be fortunate to work as an ambulance chaser in Jersey." No emotion colored his voice, just stated fact. "When would this happen?" "The marriage?" 48 hours. I have a judge who owes me favors. Private ceremony, legal and binding. This is completely insane. You've mentioned that. Are you saying no?" I turned back to face him. Those dark brown eyes held no judgment, no pressure. Just patient, waiting for a decision he seemed confident I'd already made. Maybe I had. 500,000, I said. In writing. And I want it confirmed that separate bedrooms means actual separation. No expectations. Done. He moved to his desk, produced a document that suggested he'd prepared this well in advance, and slid it across to me. "Read it. Take your time. If you agree, sign." I read every word. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. 6 months, marriage in name and legal standing, $500,000 deposited to my account upon finalization of his business deal, with an additional clause guaranteeing payment even if the deal fell through no fault of mine. My hand shook slightly as I signed my name. Thomas added his signature below mine, witnessed it, and extended his hand. "Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. D'Angelo." His grip was firm, warm, and absolutely nothing about this felt safe. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca that didn't advertise its existence. No doorman, just biometric security and cameras positioned at angles that covered every approach. Thomas's driver had delivered my belongings 3 hours ago. Now I stood in the marble entryway of my new home, feeling like an intruder in a museum. "Your room is through here." Thomas moved past me, his presence somehow filling the vast space. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom larger than my entire previous apartment. King bed, sitting area, ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub, and windows overlooking the Hudson River. Everything you need should be here. Lucia handled the arrangements. Lucia? My sister. She manages certain aspects of the family business. She'll want to meet you. He said it casually, but something in his tone suggested this meeting would be more interrogation than introduction. The apartment itself defied my expectations. I'd anticipated something ostentatious, dripping with wealth like Sophia's family estate. Instead, everything spoke of quiet power, modern furniture in neutral tones, artwork that was probably worth more than I wanted to calculate, and an underlying sense that this space doubled as a fortress. The security system requires your fingerprint now, Thomas continued, leading me to a panel beside the entrance. Press here. I complied, watching as the system registered my biometrics. Seems excessive for a temporary arrangement. Nothing about my life allows for inadequate security. He stepped back, studying me with that same assessing look from the car. You'll find that precautions are necessary, not excessive, because of your business. Because I have enemies who would use anyone connected to me as leverage. Which is why, starting now, you don't leave this building without security. My spine stiffened. That wasn't part of the contract. It was implied in the clause about maintaining your safety. I take that seriously. Before I could argue, the elevator chimed. Thomas's posture shifted subtly, and I realized he'd positioned himself between me and the entrance. The doors opened to reveal a woman who could only be Lucia. She shared Thomas's dark eyes and sharp features, but where his presence suggested controlled violence, hers radiated calculated intelligence. Mid-30s, wearing a charcoal suit that managed to look both professional and vaguely threatening. She stepped into the apartment with the confidence of someone who belonged here more than I ever would. So this is the architect. Lucia's gaze swept over me, cataloging everything from my off-the-rack dress to the defensive set of my shoulders. Alyssa Price, 28, recently promoted, publicly humiliated by an ex-fiancé who trades up for political connections. Interesting choice, Thomas. Lucia. Thomas's voice carried a warning. What? I'm simply acknowledging that your new wife has had a difficult week. She moved closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. I need to know you understand what you've signed up for. My brother's world isn't safe, and marriage to him, even a temporary one, makes you a target. She's been briefed, Thomas said. Briefed isn't the same as understanding. Lucia circled me slowly, and I felt like prey being evaluated. Tell me, Alyssa, if someone put a gun to your head and demanded information about Thomas's business dealings, what would you do? I don't know anything about his business dealings. Exactly, and you'll keep it that way. No questions about where he goes, who he meets with, or what happens in those waterfront warehouses. Ignorance isn't just bliss in this situation. It's survival. Lucia, enough. Thomas's tone hardened. She held up her hands in mock surrender. Just making sure we're all clear on expectations. I'll leave you two to settle in. Alyssa, I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. The smile she offered held no warmth. Welcome to the family. The elevator doors closed behind her, and silence settled over the apartment like dust. She doesn't trust me, I said. She doesn't trust anyone. It's kept her alive this long. Thomas moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets. But she'll come around. Lucia respects competence. And your professional credentials are solid. How reassuring. He glanced back at me, and something flickered in his expression. Almost amusement. You should rest. We have an event tomorrow night. The annual Garrison Foundation Gala. Black tie, significant attendance, and your ex-fiancé will definitely be there with his new prize. My stomach clenched. Already? Proving our marriage is legitimate requires being seen together in the right circles. The Garrison Gala is ideal, plus watching Cameron's face when we walk in together will be entertaining. For you, maybe. For both of us. Trust me. He headed toward what I assumed was his own bedroom. There's a dress in your closet. Lucia selected it. Wear whatever jewelry you prefer from the safe. Combination is your birthday. He disappeared into his room before I could process that last detail. The safe in my closet contained jewelry that made my eyes water. Diamond necklaces, emerald earrings, pieces that belonged in museum displays, not on my neck. I chose simple pearl studs that wouldn't make me feel like I was playing dress-up. The dress, however, was impossible to ignore. Deep navy silk that somehow managed to look both elegant and sensual, cut to fit perfectly despite Lucia never having taken my measurements. I didn't want to think about how she'd acquired that information. Sleep came in fragments that night. Every sound in the unfamiliar apartment pulled me back to consciousness. At 2 a.m., I gave up and wandered into the kitchen for water. Thomas sat at the island counter, laptop open, still wearing his suit from earlier. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Trouble sleeping? He asked finally. Strange bed. Strange life. I poured water from the filtered dispenser. Do you ever sleep? Not much. Comes with the territory. He closed the laptop. You'll adjust. Most people do. Most people haven't signed a contract to marry a stranger. Fair point. He studied me across the kitchen, and I suddenly became aware that I wore only an oversized t-shirt and shorts. For what it's worth, I'll do everything possible to make sure these 6 months don't destroy your life. Just temporarily disrupt it. Exactly. That almost smile returned. The gala tomorrow will set the tone. People will talk, speculate, probably create elaborate theories about how we met. Let them. The more attention on our relationship, the less attention on other matters. You mean your actual business. I mean anything that doesn't concern you. He stood, and I realized how much space he occupied just by existing. Get some rest, Alyssa. Tomorrow will be easier if you're not exhausted. He left me alone in the kitchen, and I finished my water in the dark, watching the city lights blur through the windows. The next evening arrived too quickly. The dress fit like it had been designed for me, and the pearl earrings provided just enough elegance without screaming desperation. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Professional armor, I told myself. Just another kind of blueprint to follow. Thomas waited in the living room, and when I emerged, something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval. More like recognition that I'd understood the assignment. You look perfect, he said simply. Thank you for specifying that this is a performance. His mouth curved slightly. Everything is a performance, Alyssa. The only difference is how well we execute it. The car ride to the gala passed in silence. Thomas spent it on his phone, speaking in low tones about shipments and schedules that I deliberately didn't listen to. When we pulled up to the Metropolitan Museum, where the Garrison Foundation had rented the entire building, photographers lined the entrance like a gauntlet. Thomas stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand. Ready? No, absolutely not. But I took his hand anyway and let him guide me into the camera flashes. Questions erupted from the press line. Mr. D'Angelo, who is your date? Is it true you recently got married? Miss Price, how long have you known Thomas D'Angelo? Thomas ignored them all, his hand settling on my lower back as we moved through the entrance. The touch burned through the silk of my dress, proprietary and deliberate. Message received, I thought. To everyone watching, I belong to him now. The gala's main hall glittered with Manhattan's elite. I spotted business leaders, politicians, and more than a few faces I recognized from gossip columns. And there, near the center of the room, stood Cameron and Sophia. They saw us at the same moment. Cameron's expression shifted from confident to confused, to something that looked almost like panic. Thomas leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. Shall we go say hello to your ex-fiancé? I think it's time he met your husband. The possessive emphasis on husband shouldn't have sent heat through my veins. But it did, and I let Thomas guide me directly toward the couple who'd humiliated me less than a week ago. This was going to be interesting. Cameron's face went through several expressions in rapid succession as we approached. Confusion melted into recognition, then something closer to genuine alarm when he registered Thomas's hand resting possessively on my waist. Alyssa. He recovered his composure with visible effort. I didn't expect to see you here. Funny. I was thinking the same about you. I kept my voice light, pleasant. Cameron, Sophia. I'd like you to meet my husband, Thomas D'Angelo. Sophia's carefully maintained smile fractured. Husband. That's impossible. The engagement just ended. A week ago. Thomas's tone remained conversational, but his presence commanded attention from everyone within earshot. Plenty of time for Alyssa and me to recognize what we have. We were married 3 days ago in a private ceremony. Cameron's throat worked. He knew the name D'Angelo. Everyone in Manhattan's power circles knew that name and what it represented. How convenient, Sophia managed, recovering slightly. You certainly moved on quickly, Alyssa. Thomas's fingers tightened imperceptibly on my waist. My wife doesn't need to justify her choices to anyone, especially not to people who lack the grace to treat her with respect. The temperature around our small circle dropped several degrees. Cameron cleared his throat. Of course. We wish you both every happiness. I'm sure you do. Thomas's smile held no warmth. Enjoy your evening. He guided me away before either of them could respond, his hand never leaving contact with my body. We wove through clusters of guests, and I felt eyes tracking our movement. Whispers followed in our wake. That was brutal, I murmured. That was necessary. By tomorrow morning, everyone who matters will know you're untouchable. He caught the attention of a passing waiter and secured 2 glasses of champagne. Now we circulate. Let people see us together and establish that this marriage is legitimate. The next hour blurred into a parade of introductions. Business associates of Thomas, politicians who smiled too widely, socialites who assessed my dress and jewelry with predatory interest. Thomas handled it all with practiced ease, introducing me as his wife with a possessiveness that felt disturbingly natural. When we finally found a quiet corner near the museum's Greek sculpture exhibit, I exhaled tension I hadn't realized I was holding. "You're good at this," Thomas observed. "Most people find these events exhausting. I spent years attending firm functions where I was the youngest person in the room by a decade. I learned to adapt. I sipped the champagne, which was predictably excellent, though I'm usually not playing the role of mafia wife. Technically, you're playing the role of my wife. The mafia part is secondary." "Sure, because people definitely see you as just a businessman." His expression shifted, something darker entering those brown eyes. They see what I allow them to see. Power, control, success. The specifics of how I achieve those things remained deliberately vague. Before I could respond, Lucia appeared from the crowd like a sharply dressed specter. "Thomas, we have a situation." His demeanor changed instantly. The charming husband vanished, replaced by someone harder. "What kind of situation?" "Franco Verciani is here, with architectural plans for a development project in Red Hook. He's presenting them to the Castellano family in the East Gallery. Something passed between them. Some silent communication I couldn't decipher." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Excuse me for a moment." He disappeared into the crowd with Lucia, leaving me standing alone among priceless artifacts. I should have stayed put, played the dutiful wife waiting for her husband's return. Instead, curiosity pulled me toward the East Gallery. The space housed Egyptian artifacts, and a small group had gathered near the temple reconstruction. I recognized some faces from earlier introductions. The Castellano family, old money Italian with connections that spanned continents. And there, presenting large blueprints spread across a makeshift table, stood a man who could only be Franco Verciani. He was shorter than Thomas, stockier, with olive skin and eyes that suggested cruelty lived close to the surface. His suit cost a fortune, and he wore it like armor. "The location is ideal," Franco said, gesturing to the plans. "Direct port access, minimal residential complaints, and construction can begin within 3 months of approval." I moved closer, angling to see the blueprints. My architectural training kicked in automatically, analyzing the drawings with professional interest. Something was wrong. The structural supports were inadequate for the building height indicated. The foundation specifications didn't match the soil composition typical of Red Hook's waterfront, and the loading dock design suggested purpose-built access for vehicles much larger than standard commercial trucks. This wasn't a legitimate development project. This was a facility designed to conceal something. "Alyssa." Thomas appeared at my elbow, his tone neutral, but his body language screaming tension. "I see you found the architectural discussion." Franco's gaze snapped to me, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. "Your wife has an interest in construction?" "My wife is an architect, a talented one." Thomas's hand settled on my lower back again. "What do you think of the plans, darling?" The endearment sounded natural, practiced. I played along. "They're interesting. Though I noticed the foundation specifications seem unusual for waterfront construction." Franco's expression hardened fractionally. "The engineers assured me the design is sound." "I'm sure they did." I kept my tone light, conversational. "It's just that Red Hook's soil composition typically requires deeper pilings for buildings over 6 stories. These plans show 8 stories with relatively shallow foundation work. It seems risky." Silence fell across the small gathering. The Castellanos exchanged glances. Franco's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps your wife should focus on her own projects, D'Angelo," Franco said softly. "Perhaps your engineers should review their calculations." Thomas's voice remained pleasant, but something lethal lurked beneath the surface. My wife has designed multiple waterfront structures. If she sees a problem, there's usually a problem. We left the gallery shortly after, and Thomas's grip on my arm was gentle but unyielding as he guided me toward the exit. We collected our coats in silence, and the car ride home began with tension thick enough to choke on. "I didn't mean to interfere," I said finally. "You didn't interfere. You identified something I should have caught myself." He stared out the window at passing streetlights. "Franco isn't building commercial space. He's creating a warehouse for contraband storage, probably weapons. The inadequate foundation would actually serve his purpose, allowing for underground additions without proper permitting. And you stopped it by having me point out the flaws publicly. I stopped it by making sure the Castellanos know the project is poorly planned. They won't invest in something that could collapse and draw regulatory attention." He turned to face me. "You may have just prevented a territorial war." The weight of that statement settled over me. "I thought I wasn't supposed to question your business." "You weren't questioning my business. You were applying your professional expertise to a construction project. There's a difference." Something shifted in his expression. "Thank you." The penthouse felt different when we returned. Less like a fortress, more like shared space. Thomas loosened his tie, poured whiskey from a crystal decanter, and gestured toward the couch. "Sit. We should talk." I obeyed, kicking off heels that had been killing me for hours. He settled at the other end of the couch, maintaining respectful distance. "Franco will figure out that you identified the problems in his plans," Thomas said. "He'll see you as an obstacle. Should I be worried?" "I won't let anything happen to you. But you need to understand that by helping me tonight, you've entered my world more deeply than either of us planned." I studied him in the low light of the apartment. Strong features, that scar through his eyebrow that suggested violence in his past, eyes that held too many secrets. Why do I get the feeling this arrangement just became significantly more complicated? Because you're intelligent enough to recognize when circumstances shift. He took a slow sip of whiskey. "The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from my boss at the architecture firm. "Effective immediately. You're on paid leave pending review of recent publicity. We'll reassess your position in 30 days. I showed Thomas the screen. He read it without expression. "They're trying to appease clients who saw you as a liability," he said. "It won't work. By next week, you'll have more project offers than you can handle." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because people are already talking about Thomas D'Angelo's architect wife, who publicly embarrassed Franco Versiani without breaking a sweat. That kind of composure and expertise? It's valuable." He stood, collecting his whiskey, and moved toward his bedroom. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't stay put in that corner like I expected you to. Your instincts tonight were perfect. The compliment shouldn't have warmed me. This was a business arrangement. 6 months and $500,000. Nothing more. But when I finally made it to my own bedroom, I caught myself smiling at my reflection, and the woman looking back seemed different somehow. Stronger, more certain. Dangerous territory, I thought. Getting used to this. I fell asleep anyway. And for the first time since moving into the penthouse, I didn't wake up once until morning. My paid leave turned into unexpected freedom. For the first time in 3 years, I had mornings without rushed commutes and evenings without deadline panic. I should have enjoyed it. Instead, restlessness drove me back to work within the week, tackling personal projects from Thomas's penthouse while he conducted business I deliberately didn't ask about. We'd fallen into a strange rhythm. Breakfast together when his schedule allowed, careful conversations that skirted anything too personal, and nights where we occupied opposite ends of the apartment like respectful strangers. The tension from the gala had faded into something more manageable, almost comfortable, which should have been my first warning that something was about to shatter the equilibrium. I was reviewing blueprints for a residential complex I'd been designing in my spare time when Thomas emerged from his office, phone pressed to his ear. His expression had shifted into something darker, all the careful control stripped away. "How many?" He listened, jaw tightening. "Keep her there. I'm coming now." He ended the call and turned to me. "Get your things. We're leaving." "What happened?" "There's a situation at one of my construction sites. I need to handle it personally." He was already moving toward the door, grabbing a jacket from the closet. "You're coming with me." "Why would I come to a construction site?" "Because leaving you here without me defeats the purpose of keeping you protected." He held the door open, and something in his expression told me arguing would be pointless. The site was in Brooklyn, a commercial development near the waterfront that Thomas's legitimate construction company was building. Scaffolding climbed 6 stories, and workers moved between floors despite the late afternoon hour. Thomas's driver pulled directly onto the site, past security that waved us through without question. Vincent, Thomas's head of security, and a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, met us at the entrance. "Boss, she's in the foreman's trailer. Shaken but not hurt." "She?" I followed Thomas toward a construction trailer at the site's edge. The site manager. "Someone left a message for her. Specifically about you." Cold spread through my chest. Inside the trailer, a woman in her 50s sat at a desk, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She looked up when we entered, relief flooding her features. "Mr. D'Angelo." "Thank God." I didn't know who else to call. Thomas moved to her desk, where a piece of paper lay spread out. I edged closer to read the message scrawled in block letters. "Tell D'Angelo his architect wife should stay out of things that don't concern her." When did this arrive? Thomas's voice had gone flat, empty of inflection, in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger. 2 hours ago, taped to my office door. I called Vincent immediately. "Good. Take the rest of the day. Vincent will ensure you get home safely." Thomas picked up the note carefully, sliding it into his jacket pocket. "Alyssa, wait in the car. I want to see the site." He turned to look at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Fear. Actual fear, raw and unconcealed. "Alyssa, I'm an architect, Thomas. If someone is threatening me over construction projects, I want to see what they're so concerned about." For a long moment, he simply stared at me. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Vincent, sweep the perimeter again. I'm taking her through." The construction site smelled like concrete dust and metal. Thomas stayed close as we climbed temporary stairs to the 2nd floor, his hand hovering near my lower back without quite touching. His security detail fanned out around us, alert to every shadow. "This is a mixed-use development," Thomas explained, his tone carefully neutral. "Retail on the ground floor, offices above. Completely legitimate business. But Franco thinks I'm interfering with more than just his projects. Franco is realizing that having you around makes it harder for him to operate. You have expertise he can't easily counter." We stopped at a window opening that overlooked the water. This is exactly the kind of location he'd want for his warehouse. We acquired the property before he could. The pieces clicked together. You're using legitimate construction to block his illegal operations. I'm using legitimate construction to expand my business interests. If it happens to limit his options, that's incidental. He studied the harbor view. But yes. And now he's decided to make you a target. He left a note. That's not exactly a direct threat. Thomas turned to face me, and the intensity in his dark brown eyes pinned me in place. It's a declaration of intent. Next time, it won't be a note. So what do? We increase security. You don't go anywhere without Vincent or someone equally capable. And wow, the explosion wasn't loud. More like a muffled thump from somewhere below us. But the building shuddered, and Thomas's reflexes kicked in instantly. He grabbed me, pulling me away from the window as shouting erupted from the ground floor. "Stay behind me." His voice had gone cold, controlled. He moved toward the stairs, one hand on my arm, the other reaching for something at his back. A gun, I realized with distant shock. He was armed. Vincent appeared at the bottom of the stairs, weapon drawn. "Gas main rupture in the basement. Contained, but we need to evacuate. Could be deliberate." Thomas's grip on my arm tightened. We descended quickly, his body positioned between me and any potential threat. Workers streamed past us toward the exits, and the organized chaos suggested they'd drilled for exactly this scenario. We made it to the car without incident, but Thomas didn't relax until we were several blocks away. He kept his hand on my knee, fingers pressed hard enough to leave marks through my jeans. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough. "No, I'm fine." "Thomas, look at me." He did, finally, and what I saw in his expression made something in my chest tighten. Not just fear, terror, the kind that came from experiencing loss before. "I'm okay," I said again, softer. His hand moved from my knee to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "This isn't worth $500,000. This isn't worth any amount of money." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we end the contract. Tonight. I'll still pay you, still destroy Cameron, but you go somewhere safe until No, Alyssa. No. I'm not running because someone tried to intimidate us with an explosion that was probably faulty construction, not sabotage." The lie felt transparent even as I spoke it, but I pushed forward anyway. "I signed a contract. 6 months. I don't break my commitments." Something shifted in his expression. The fear remained, but something else emerged alongside it. Something that looked dangerously like admiration. "You're either incredibly brave or completely foolish." "Both, probably." My pulse hammered against my throat. "But I'm not leaving." The car pulled into the underground garage beneath the penthouse building. Neither of us moved to exit immediately. Thomas's hand remained against my face, warm and possessive, and I couldn't remember why I'd insisted on separate bedrooms and professional distance. "I lost someone once," he said quietly. "My wife, 7 years ago. We were driving home from a restaurant and a car forced us off the road. I survived. She didn't." The pain in his voice was raw, unfiltered. "Thomas, I'm sorry. They targeted her to hurt me. A rival family, sending a message about territorial disputes. I swore after that night I'd never put anyone in that position again. Never care enough about someone to make them vulnerable. But you married me. Because it was supposed to be a contract. Business. No real emotion involved." His thumb traced my jawline, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that stole my breath, except somewhere between the gala and tonight. That changed. I should have pulled away. Should have reminded him about the agreement, the terms, the very clear boundaries we'd established. Instead, I leaned into his touch. "Thomas, this isn't He kissed me before I could finish the sentence. Not gentle, not tentative. A claiming kiss that tasted like fear and relief, and something deeper that neither of us had words for. His hand slid into my hair, angling my head as he deepened the kiss. And I responded with equal intensity, months of tension finally finding release. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against mine. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "I won't survive it again." "Then don't push me away." I gripped his jacket, anchoring myself to something solid in a world that had shifted beneath my feet. "We face this together, or we don't face it at all." His laugh was short, almost bitter. "You have no idea what you're signing up for." "Then show me. No more protecting me from information. No more treating me like I'm fragile. If I'm really in danger, I need to know everything." He pulled back enough to study my face, searching for something. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. "Everything," he agreed, starting with the fact that Franco Verciani isn't working alone. Someone close to me has been feeding him information. Someone who knew exactly where you'd be today. The implications settled over me like ice water. "You have a traitor. I have a problem that could get us both killed if we don't identify them first." He finally released me, straightening in the seat. "Welcome to my world, Alyssa. It's significantly more complicated than construction plans and foundation specifications." We exited the car and headed for the elevator. And I realized with startling clarity that the contract I'd signed had become irrelevant somewhere along the way. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't even about revenge on Cameron. This was about survival, partnership, and something that felt dangerously close to the kind of connection I'd sworn to avoid. The elevator doors closed, sealing us in, and Thomas reached for my hand. I let him take it, fingers intertwining with his, and didn't let go until we reached the penthouse. Thomas's penthouse transformed into a command center overnight. Maps appeared on the dining table, locations marked with pins and circles. Lucia arrived at dawn with files thick enough to double as weapons, and the two of them spent hours analyzing patterns I couldn't decipher. I'd been relegated to my bedroom with Vincent stationed outside the door like a particularly intimidating piece of furniture. protected, secured, completely useless. By noon, I'd had enough. This is ridiculous. I pushed past Vincent, ignoring his protest, and marched into the dining room where Thomas and Lucia hunched over surveillance photos. You can't keep me locked in a room like a prisoner. Thomas looked up, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. I can keep you safe. That's what matters. Safe and ignorant. You said no more protection from information. That lasted all of 12 hours. Lucia glanced between us, something calculating in her expression. She has a point, Thomas. If someone is targeting her specifically, she deserves to understand the scope. The scope is that Franco has a source inside my organization who knew Alyssa would be at that construction site. Thomas's voice was hard. Until I identify who, everyone is suspect. Even Lucia? I moved closer to the table, studying the photos. Men in expensive suits. Some I recognized from the gala. Even Vincent? Vincent has been with me for 15 years. Lucia is family. But yes, technically, until I have proof, everyone is potentially compromised. The admission cost him. I could see it in the tension across his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the table. Then let me help. I pulled out a chair and sat, uninvited. I'm an architect. I solve structural problems by analyzing patterns. Maybe I can see something you're missing. Lucia raised an eyebrow at Thomas. I like her. She's persistent. Persistent is one word for it. But Thomas gestured to the files spread across the table. Fine. These are the people who knew your location yesterday. 23 individuals with access to my schedule, security details, or both. I scanned the list. Most names meant nothing to me, but a few stood out. Associates from the gala, business partners Thomas had mentioned in passing, and there, near the bottom, a name that made my stomach clench. Cameron Price has legal counsel with Hartman and Associates, I said slowly. That's the firm that handles real estate transactions for your construction company. Thomas and Lucia exchanged glances. How do you know that? Thomas asked. Because Cameron used to brag about landing them as a client. Said they represented some of the biggest developers on the East Coast. I pulled the relevant file closer. If Cameron has access to Hartman's files, he'd know about your projects. Timelines, locations, everything. Lucia was already on her phone, speaking in rapid Italian. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that raised heat along my skin. You're right. Cameron could be feeding information to Franco through legal channels, staying clean while causing maximum damage. But why? What does he gain? Revenge, probably. You humiliated him by marrying me. His political aspirations require positive publicity, and your success reflects poorly on his judgment. Thomas stood, pacing to the windows. Or Franco is paying him. Cameron has debts, gambling, from what my sources indicate. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. Cameron. Desperate and vindictive. Selling information that could get me killed. The man I'd almost married. If it's Cameron, how do we prove it? I asked. Thomas turned back to face me. We set a trap. Feed him false information through channels he'd have access to. Then see if Franco acts on it. And if Franco does act, I'm the bait. Absolutely not. Thomas crossed back to the table in 2 strides. We use a decoy, a false trail that suggests you'll be at a location you'll actually be nowhere near. That could work. Lucia ended her call and rejoined the conversation. But we need something convincing. Information valuable enough that Franco can't ignore it. I studied the maps on the table, the marked locations of Thomas's various business interests. An idea formed, risky, and probably foolish, but potentially effective. What if we use architecture as the bait? I looked up at Thomas. I've been working on a design for a waterfront development. Mixed use, prime location, exactly the kind of project Franco would want to sabotage or steal. We let it slip that I'm presenting the plans to investors at a specific location and time. And when Franco sends people to intercept, we'll know Cameron is the leak. Thomas nodded slowly. It's dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. At least this way, we're controlling the variables. Lucia smiled, sharp and approving. I'm starting to understand why you married her, Thomas. She thinks like one of us. She thinks like an architect. Everything is about structure and stability. But something in Thomas's expression had softened. All right, we'll do it. But on my terms. With my security protocols. The next 3 days moved in controlled chaos. I refined the architectural plans until they looked legitimate enough to be worth stealing. Thomas arranged for word to reach Cameron through carefully positioned sources at Hartman and Associates. The presentation was scheduled for a warehouse Thomas controlled in Red Hook, the same neighborhood where Franco had wanted to build his suspicious development. Security preparations turned the warehouse into a fortress. Cameras covered every angle, armed guards positioned on all approaches, and escape routes planned to the second. Vincent walked me through the protocols until I could recite them in my sleep. The night before the planned presentation, I couldn't sleep. Adrenaline and anxiety kept me pacing my bedroom until I finally gave up and wandered into the living room. Thomas sat on the couch in the dark, city lights providing the only illumination. He'd changed into comfortable clothes, the first time I'd seen him in anything other than suits. Somehow it made him more human, more accessible. Couldn't sleep either? I settled on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining careful distance. Sleep seems optional lately. He studied me in the dim light. You don't have to go through with this tomorrow. We can find another way. I want to, not just because it helps identify the leak, but because I need to stop feeling helpless. I pulled my knees up, wrapping my arms around them. When Cameron broke our engagement, I felt powerless, like my life was happening to me, not because of choices I made. I refuse to feel that way again, even if it means walking into potential danger, especially then, because I'm choosing to walk into it, with preparations and backup and a plan. That's different than being blindsided. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved closer, closing the distance between us until his shoulder brushed mine. For what it's worth, I understand. After my wife died, I spent 2 years making myself untouchable, building walls that no one could penetrate. It didn't bring her back, but it gave me the illusion of control. What changed? Nothing, until recently. Until a woman in a burgundy dress sat crying on a curb and looked at me like I was either salvation or another disaster waiting to happen. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining. You make me want to tear down those walls, which is terrifying. I turned to look at him properly, searching his face for the truth beneath the words. Thomas, when this is over, when the 6 months are up, don't. He cupped my face with his free hand, thumb tracing my cheekbone. Don't think about timelines or contracts right now. Just be here, with me, in this moment. I should have pulled away. Should have reminded us both about boundaries and professional arrangements. Instead, I leaned into his touch and let him kiss me with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about his reputation. We stayed on that couch until dawn, painted the sky pink and gold, talking about everything except tomorrow's plan. He told me about growing up in his father's shadow, learning the family business before he understood what it truly meant. I told him about building a career in a male-dominated field, fighting for respect with every project. By the time Lucia arrived with coffee and final preparations, something had shifted between us. Partnership had deepened into something neither of us wanted to name, but couldn't ignore. Ready? Thomas asked as we prepared to leave for the warehouse. I checked my bag, confirming the architectural plans were secured. As ready as I'll ever be. Vincent drove us to Red Hook in tense silence. The warehouse looked innocuous from outside, just another industrial building among dozens. Inside, it had been transformed into a convincing presentation space. Display boards, lighting, even a podium for my supposed pitch to investors. The investors are my people, Thomas explained, gesturing to 3 men in suits who could have stepped out of a corporate boardroom. They'll play their roles. You present the plans like it's legitimate. If Franco takes the bait, his people will make a move. And if they don't, then Cameron isn't our leak, and we're back to investigating other possibilities. The hours crawled by. I went through the presentation 3 times, each word measured and professional. Thomas's fake investors asked appropriate questions. Vincent and his team monitored all approaches to the building. Nothing happened. By hour 4, I'd begun to doubt the entire plan. Maybe Cameron wasn't involved. Maybe we'd misread the situation completely. Then Lucia's phone buzzed. She stepped away, spoke rapidly in Italian, and returned with an expression that was half triumph, half concern. "We have movement," she said quietly. 3 vehicles approaching from the south. Franco's people, based on the plates. Thomas's entire demeanor shifted. "Everyone in position. Alyssa, with me. Now." He guided me toward the back of the warehouse where Vincent had prepared an armored vehicle. But we didn't get in. Instead, Thomas positioned us behind a stack of crates with a clear view of the entrance. "I thought I was supposed to evacuate," I whispered. "Change of plans. I want you to see who shows up. Confirm it's Franco's people. Your testimony will be valuable later." Before I could protest, the warehouse doors burst open. 5 men entered, weapons visible, moving with military precision. And behind them, looking uncomfortable and out of place in khakis and a button-down shirt, walked Cameron Price. My ex-fiancé had just confirmed himself as the traitor who'd been trying to get me killed. Cameron looked smaller than I remembered. Less polished, with wrinkled clothes and the kind of desperate energy that came from bad decisions compounding. He glanced around the warehouse nervously, while Franco's men fanned out, searching for the architectural plans that didn't actually exist in any accessible location. "She should be here," one of Franco's men said, thick accent coloring his English. The schedule said presentation at 2 o'clock. Maybe she got spooked. Cameron's voice carried across the empty space. D'Angelo could have figured out we had access to his calendar. Or maybe D'Angelo set a trap, and you walked right into it. Thomas stepped out from behind the crates, and I watched with fascination as 5 weapons immediately pointed at him. He didn't even flinch. "Hello, Cameron. Interesting company you're keeping these days." Cameron's face went pale. "Thomas, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you've been feeding information to Franco Versiani in exchange for what, exactly? Money to cover your gambling debts? Revenge because my wife moved on faster than you expected? Your wife." Cameron's expression twisted into something ugly. "You mean the woman who was supposed to need me? Supposed to come crawling back when reality hit. Instead, she lands a mafia boss who turns her into someone untouchable. So this is about ego." I stepped out beside Thomas, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. "You couldn't handle that I didn't fall apart without you." All 5 weapons shifted to point at me. Thomas moved instantly, positioning himself between me and the guns. But I sidestepped, keeping myself visible. "Alyssa, get back," Thomas said, voice low and dangerous. "No, I want him to explain." I kept my eyes on Cameron. "The humiliation at Bellacourt wasn't enough? You had to try to get me killed? I didn't think Franco would actually hurt you." Cameron's words came fast, defensive. "He just wanted to scare you, make you back off from interfering with his projects. I thought if you were scared enough, you'd leave D'Angelo, and then maybe I'd come back to you?" Disbelief colored my voice. "After you publicly destroyed me? You're delusional." "I'm trying to survive. Those gambling debts aren't just money I owe, Alyssa. They're debts to people who break legs when you don't pay. Franco offered a solution. Information about D'Angelo's operations in exchange for clearing what I owed. So you sold out your ex-fiancé to save yourself." Thomas's tone could have cut glass. "Admirable." One of Franco's men spoke into a radio, rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. Whatever response he received made his expression harden. "We need to go. Police are coming." "Police?" Cameron looked confused. "Why would police?" "Because I called them." Lucia emerged from another section of the warehouse, phone in hand. "Specifically, I called my contacts at the FBI. They've been very interested in Franco Versiani's arms trafficking operation. And now they have witnesses, recordings, and you, Cameron, admitting to conspiracy." The warehouse doors burst open again, but this time it was federal agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Franco's men dropped their guns immediately, professionals who knew when they'd been outmaneuvered. Cameron just stood frozen, comprehension finally dawning. "You set me up," he whispered. "You set yourself up," I said. "We just gave you the opportunity to confess." The agents moved efficiently, securing Franco's men in handcuffs. One approached Cameron with similar intent, and reality seemed to hit him all at once. He lunged, not toward an exit, but toward me. Thomas intercepted him before he got within 3 feet, slamming him against a concrete support pillar with enough force to knock the air from Cameron's lungs. "Don't." Thomas's voice was barely above a whisper, but the threat in it was absolute. "Don't even look at her again." An agent pulled Thomas back, and Cameron crumpled to the ground. They cuffed him efficiently while reading rights that Cameron probably couldn't hear over his own panicked breathing. "Mr. D'Angelo, Mrs. D'Angelo, we'll need statements." The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of command, gestured toward a cleared area. "This way, please." The next 2 hours blurred together. Statements, recordings, confirmation of details. Lucia had apparently been working with the FBI for months, building a case against Franco that tonight's events had gift-wrapped. Cameron's confession, recorded from multiple angles, provided the final pieces. By the time we returned to the penthouse, exhaustion had settled into my bones. Thomas dismissed Vincent and Lucia, who'd accompanied us back, and we were finally alone. "You shouldn't have stepped out like that." Thomas paced the living room, controlled fury radiating from every movement. "Those men had guns pointed at you. Any one of them could have fired. But they didn't. That's not the point, Alyssa." He spun to face me. "You could have been killed. Do you understand that? One wrong move, one trigger-happy thug, and I would have watched you die. Like your first wife." He froze. "What? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're terrified that history will repeat itself, that someone you care about will die because of your world." I moved closer, closing the distance he'd put between us. "But I'm not her, Thomas. I made the choice to step out there. I needed Cameron to see that I wasn't afraid of him anymore. You should be afraid. Fear keeps people alive, and love makes that life worth living." The word hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. Thomas stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Love. Yes. Love." I reached for his hand, felt the tremor running through his fingers. I know this wasn't supposed to happen. The contract was clear, clinical, temporary, but somewhere between the gala and tonight, I fell in love with you. And I think you fell in love with me too. He pulled his hand away, creating distance again. "You don't know what you're saying. This is adrenaline, post-crisis reaction. This is me, standing in your living room telling you the truth." My voice remained steady, even as my heart hammered. "I love you. Your darkness, your protectiveness, the way you look at me like I'm both precious and impossibly frustrating. I love that you built walls to keep people safe and then let me climb over them anyway. Alyssa, I can't, His voice cracked. "Everyone I love ends up in danger. My wife died because of me. Tonight, you almost died because of me. Tonight, I almost died because Cameron is a selfish coward who made terrible choices. That's not on you." I closed the distance again, refusing to let him retreat. "And your first wife's death wasn't your fault either. You didn't force that car off the road. You didn't pull the trigger or plant the bomb or whatever actually happened. You survived, Thomas. That's not a crime." He grabbed my shoulders, not gently. "How can you be so reckless with your own safety? How can you stand here and tell me you love me when loving me means living with constant threats? Because the alternative is living without you. And that sounds infinitely worse." I reached up, cupping his face. "I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing us. Not because of a contract or money or revenge, but because when I look at you, I see home." Something in him broke. I saw it happen. Watched the walls he'd maintained so carefully crumble. He kissed me desperately, hands tangling in my hair, pulling me impossibly closer. I responded with equal intensity, pouring every emotion from the past weeks into the connection between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then be terrified with me, but don't push me away. I don't know how to do this, how to love someone and not destroy them. We'll figure it out together. That's what partnership means." I kissed him again, softer this time. "No more protecting me from your world. No more keeping me at arm's length. We face everything together, or we don't face it at all. He pulled back enough to look at me properly. You're asking me to trust that you can survive in my world. I'm asking you to trust that we're stronger together than we are apart. I held his gaze. Can you do that? For a long moment, he simply studied me, and I could see him wrestling with instincts honed by years of loss and paranoia. Then, finally, he nodded. Together, he agreed. Everything. No more secrets, no more protection from information. You're my partner, not my possession. Exactly. Relief flooded through me. Now can we please sit down? I've been running on adrenaline for hours and I'm about to collapse. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, and guided me to the couch. We collapsed into the cushions, his arm around my shoulders, my head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, grounding and real. The contract is void, you know, he said after a moment. Not because of technicalities, but because this isn't a business arrangement anymore. I know, I don't care about the money. You'll get it anyway. I keep my promises. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. But I'm hoping you'll stay for different reasons. I'm staying because I love you. You complicated, overprotective, occasionally infuriating man. Good, because I have no intention of letting you go. He kissed the top of my head. Fair warning. My world doesn't get less dangerous just because we're in love. I wouldn't expect it to, but we'll handle it together. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. I think I could get used to that. We stayed on that couch as night settled over Manhattan, neither of us willing to move, both of us finally understanding that what we'd built was worth every risk. 3 months after Cameron's arrest, Manhattan looked different from the penthouse windows. Or maybe I looked at it differently now, understanding that the city's gleaming surface concealed layers of complexity I'd never imagined before marrying Thomas D'Angelo. The original 6-month contract had expired 2 weeks ago. I'd signed the divorce papers Thomas prepared, watched him file them, and then moved my belongings from the guest bedroom into his. Because contracts were about business, and what we had now transcended any legal document. My architecture firm occupied a modest office in Chelsea, funded by the $500,000 Thomas had insisted on transferring despite my protests. 3 employees, 6 active projects, and a reputation for innovative design that had nothing to do with my husband's influence and everything to do with work that finally bore only my name. You're thinking too loud. Thomas emerged from the bathroom, hair damp from the shower, wearing the casual clothes that still seemed incongruous on someone so associated with power suits and control. I can hear it from across the apartment. I'm thinking about tonight. I turned from the window, watching him move through our bedroom with the economical grace that never failed to catch my attention. Are you sure about this? Having a celebration at the restaurant where you were publicly humiliated? Absolutely. He crossed to me, hands settling on my waist. It's poetic justice. Plus, the look on certain people's faces will be worth whatever astronomical amount they're charging for the private event. The Bellacourt restaurant, scene of my worst moment, now transformed into the venue for what Thomas insisted on calling our real wedding celebration. Not a legal ceremony, since we were technically already married and divorced, and living together in a relationship that defied conventional categorization, but a public declaration that what we had was genuine, permanent, and entirely on our terms. Sophia will be there, I said. She RSVP'd yes, probably out of morbid curiosity. Good. She should see what she missed when she chose Cameron. His mouth curved into something predatory. Cameron, who was currently awaiting trial on conspiracy charges and probably regretting every decision that led him to that warehouse. I'd seen the news coverage. Cameron's fall had been spectacular and public, his political aspirations incinerated before they could properly ignite. Sophia had distanced herself immediately, engagement broken within 48 hours of his arrest. Last I'd heard, she was dating a tech entrepreneur and pretending the Cameron chapter had never happened. I don't hate him anymore, I said, surprising myself with the truth. I almost feel sorry for him. He destroyed his own life trying to destroy mine. That's more generous than he deserves. Thomas pulled me closer, and I leaned into the solid warmth of him. But it's one of the things I love about you. You don't carry grudges once justice has been served. Justice had indeed been served. Franco Versiani faced federal charges that would keep him imprisoned for decades. His organization had crumbled without leadership, territory absorbed by families who operated with slightly more legal consideration. The explosion at Thomas's construction site had been ruled accidental, faulty gas lines, rather than sabotage, but we both knew the truth. Franco had tried to kill me, and failed. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. Car arrives at 7. Don't be late to your own party. And wear the green dress, not the blue one. Trust me, your sister is terrifying, I said, showing Thomas the message. She's efficient. There's a difference. But he smiled, the expression transforming his face from intimidating to almost boyish. Though I agree about the green dress, it makes your eyes impossible to look away from. The afternoon passed in comfortable routine. Thomas reviewed shipping manifests for his legitimate import business, while I finalized plans for a residential project in Brooklyn. We'd learned to occupy the same space without crowding each other, partnership extending beyond crisis management into the mundane details of daily life. By 7 o'clock, I wore the green dress Lucia had insisted on, emerald silk that Thomas had indeed been unable to look away from. His own suit was impeccable, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and together we looked like exactly what we were. Power couple, Manhattan elite, dangerous and respectable in equal measure. The Bellacourt hadn't changed. Same crystal chandeliers, same floor-to-ceiling windows, same marble floors I'd crossed in Humiliation months ago. But tonight, those floors led to a private dining room Thomas had reserved entirely, and the 200 guests weren't witnesses to my destruction. They were witnesses to my resurrection. Lucia met us at the entrance, stunning in midnight blue, her sharp assessment confirming we'd followed her dress code instructions. Perfect. Everyone important is already here. A few surprises too, but good ones. Define good surprises, Thomas said, immediately suspicious. You'll see. Come on, your guests are waiting. The private dining room had been transformed with elegant simplicity. White flowers, soft lighting, round tables arranged to encourage conversation. And the guests themselves represented an interesting cross-section of Manhattan society. Business leaders, architects, politicians who'd survived Cameron's fall, and faces I recognized from Thomas's world, the kind of people who understood exactly who they were celebrating with and chose to attend anyway. Alyssa, my former boss from the architecture firm, approached, genuine warmth in his expression. I'm so glad you agreed to let me come. I wanted to apologize personally for how we handled your leave. It was cowardice, pure and simple. It was business, I said, though his apology meant more than I'd expected. But thank you. Your new firm is making waves. The residential project in Brooklyn is brilliant. He glanced at Thomas, who'd positioned himself slightly behind me, protective without being possessive. You're lucky to have her. I'm aware, Thomas said simply. We circulated through the room, accepting congratulations and well wishes that felt genuine despite the underlying current of calculation that came with Thomas's social circle. These people understood power, respected it, and recognized that I'd become someone who wielded it alongside my husband, rather than hiding behind him. Sophia Hartwell stood near the windows, champagne in hand, looking simultaneously uncomfortable and fascinated. She'd lost weight since the gala, sharp edges more pronounced, and something in her expression suggested the tech entrepreneur wasn't working out as planned. Alyssa, she approached with visible effort. Thank you for inviting me. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Honesty seemed appropriate, but holding on to anger takes too much energy. And honestly, you did me a favor. A favor? She looked genuinely confused. You took Cameron off my hands before I made the mistake of actually marrying him. Saved me a divorce. I gestured around the room, and if he hadn't humiliated me that night, I never would have met Thomas. Thomas's hand settled on my lower back, warm and grounding. Sophia's gaze tracked the movement, and something like envy flickered across her face. You look happy, she said finally. Genuinely happy. I don't think I ever saw that when you were with Cameron. I wasn't. But I am now. I offered her a smile that held no malice. I hope you find that too, Sophia. Genuinely. She nodded, blinking back what might have been tears, and excused herself to refill her champagne. That was kind, Thomas said quietly. That was honest. She's not my enemy. She never was. She was just another person Cameron used for his ambitions. Lucia appeared at my elbow, practically vibrating with suppressed excitement. Time for the surprise. Thomas, don't freak out. When you tell me not to freak out, I immediately want to freak out. She ignored him and gestured toward the entrance. A woman in her 60s entered, elegant in burgundy silk, with dark hair shot through with silver, and eyes that were unmistakably related to Thomas's. Mom? Thomas's voice carried shock I'd never heard from him before. His mother crossed the room with measured grace, and I saw where he'd learned to command space through presence alone. She stopped in front of us, studying her son with an expression that held both love and assessment. Thomas, it's been too long. 3 years. You said you wanted nothing to do with the family business. I said I wanted nothing to do with the violence that killed your father and almost killed you. But Lucia tells me you found someone who's changing your priorities. I wanted to meet the woman who accomplished the impossible. She turned to me, and being assessed by Thomas's mother felt more nerve-wracking than facing down Franco's armed men. Mrs. D'Angelo, I managed. It's an honor. Call me Maria, and the honor is mine. She took my hands, squeezing gently. My son loved once before and lost everything. I didn't think he'd survive loving again, but Lucia says you're strong enough for his world and brave enough to change it. Is that true? I'm trying to be both. Some days are more successful than others. She smiled, and I saw where Thomas got his rare, transformative expressions. Honest. Good. My son needs someone who won't simply tell him what he wants to hear. She released my hands and turned back to Thomas. She's perfect for you. Don't screw this up. I'll try not to. Thomas's voice had gone rough with emotion. You came all the way from Italy for this? For you, always. Even when we don't speak. You're still my son. She kissed his cheek, whispered something in Italian that made his eyes close briefly, and moved into the crowd to greet Lucia. Surprise indeed, Thomas said, clearly struggling to process his mother's appearance. Good surprise? I asked. The best. He pulled me into his arms, ignoring the 100 pairs of eyes tracking our movement. How is my life this different from 6 months ago? Because a woman in a burgundy dress agreed to a ridiculous contract with a stranger. Best decision I ever made. He kissed me, slow and thorough, and applause rippled through the room. When we finally broke apart, Lucia had arranged everyone with champagne glasses raised. She caught Thomas's attention and nodded toward the small podium positioned near the windows. Thomas guided me there, hand never leaving contact with my body. We faced the crowd together, and he spoke without notes or preparation. 6 months ago, I witnessed something that should have been private. A woman's worst moment, made public for entertainment. I offered a solution that was purely transactional, expecting nothing beyond a business arrangement. He turned to look at me, and what I saw in his expression made my breath catch. Instead, I found a partner who refuses to accept my world as unchangeable, who sees structure and possibility where I only saw chaos. Alyssa didn't just agree to marry me. She agreed to stand beside me and push me to be better than I believed I could be. He produced a small box from his jacket pocket, and my heart stuttered. We're technically already married and divorced, which makes this legally meaningless. But symbols matter. Choices matter. He opened the box to reveal a ring that was nothing like the contract band I'd worn months ago. This was platinum set with emeralds that matched my dress, elegant and distinctive. Alyssa Price, will you marry me? Not for 6 months, not for business purposes, but for every reason that actually matters. The room had gone silent. I looked at Thomas, at the vulnerability in his expression that he'd never shown anyone else, and knew my answer had been inevitable since the night he'd found me crying on a curb. Yes, my voice carried across the sudden hush. For every reason that matters, yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and the room erupted into applause and cheers. But I barely heard them. Focused entirely on the man in front of me who'd transformed from stranger to savior, to partner, to home. I love you, he said against my lips before kissing me again. I love you too, even when your world is terrifying and complicated and occasionally violent. Especially then? Especially then. The celebration continued around us, but we stayed at that podium for another moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Through the windows behind us, Manhattan glittered in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous and full of possibility. "Think we can make this work?" I asked quietly. "Long term? Permanently? Despite everything?" Thomas pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "With you? I think we can survive anything." His expression turned serious. "Fair warning. My past doesn't disappear just because we're in love. There will always be risks, threats, moments that test us. I know. And I'm choosing you anyway. Choosing us. All of it. Then yes, we can make this work. We already have." He kissed me once more, gentle and possessive and full of promise. "Welcome to forever, Mrs. D'Angelo." "Mrs. Price D'Angelo," I corrected. I kept my name professionally, but yes, forever. We rejoined our guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, surrounded by the people who mattered. Lucia hugged me with uncharacteristic warmth. Maria offered advice about surviving in the D'Angelo world that was both terrifying and reassuring. Vincent, standing guard near the entrance despite being off duty, nodded approval. Hours later, when the celebration finally wound down and Thomas and I returned to the penthouse alone, we stood at those floor-to-ceiling windows together, his arms wrapped around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. Both of us watching the city we'd claimed as ours. "No regrets?" he asked. "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He turned me in his arms, and the love in his expression was so clear it took my breath away. "Thank you for seeing past the contract to what we could actually build together. Thank you for rescuing a woman crying on a curb and offering her the most insane proposal in history." "My pleasure. Shall we make a tradition of it? Annually proposing increasingly ridiculous arrangements? As long as they all end with us together." "I'm in." He laughed, the sound free and genuine, and kissed me with the kind of intensity that suggested we wouldn't be sleeping for several more hours. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless cycle, but inside the penthouse, we'd built something that transcended the city's chaos. Partnership. Love. A future we'd chosen together against every odd. And it all started because I'd worn the wrong dress to the right disaster.